Hello everyone, this is Nitin from Caterfly, and as promised we are doing the live tour of Lausanne from Switzerland. And let me see who all is online before we can get started. And in the meanwhile, let me just quickly introduce all of you to the concept of the live tour that we have been doing from different parts of the world. And as you know, of course, most people are under lockdown and are not able to travel. So we thought, if you are not able to travel, let us bring the world to you. And with this, hopefully you could still experience the different parts of the world. And especially since we are headquartered in Switzerland, there is no better place to kind of get started. In the last few weeks, we have covered different cities in Switzerland, mostly in the German part, Basel, Bern, Lausanne, and today we thought we will actually start with the French part of Switzerland. And of course, I think I can already see many people joining in, so let's get started. I'll repeat again. Hi guys, this is Nitin from Caterfly in Switzerland, and today, as promised, we will do the live tour of Lausanne. And of course, you are not here to see me, and hence let's quickly get started. So let me just flip over the camera to the other side, and while I'm walking through this, I will take you guys through the different parts, and let's see how we do that. Give me a minute. Okay. Okay, here we go. So Lausanne. First of all, let me quickly tell you where this city is located, and this is probably more interesting for the folks who are not aware of the overall geography and topology of Switzerland. So Switzerland actually has four distinct parts. One is the German part, which is typically the northern and the central Switzerland. And then there is the Italian part, and then you have the French part, and then of course a very mountainous region in the central mountainous the mountain passes. Now the French part of Switzerland actually has many cantons, but the most or the biggest cantons is a canton called Vaud and Geneva. Now what you could see on the far side this is actually like a big ocean, and that in fact is Lake Geneva. Lake Geneva is huge. In fact, a good part of the French part of Switzerland is around Lake Geneva, and there are many other cantons which kind of really go towards up north. And Lake Geneva from one side to another is almost like maybe 100 odd kilometers. Lausanne is the capital of Vaud region in the French part of Switzerland, yeah, and this is one of my favorite city for sure, and I'll tell you the reason why, and hopefully you will appreciate it by the end of this tour. Now Lausanne is also the fourth largest city in Switzerland. The first three you probably can guess, and maybe you can write in the comment, and until then I will probably get started. So I'm going to start with one of the most prominent piece of architecture in Lausanne. This is the Cathedral of Luzon. Like any other European city, of course, the cathedral are one of the most important places where people typically gather together for worship, as well as given its location. Of course, I mean, you could see that it's a hilly city. You could literally get a very good view of the entire Lake Geneva region. I will talk more about the mountains in the backdrop later on, but until then let me talk very quickly about this cathedral, because we have lots to cover. this cathedral was originally constructed in the 11th and the 12th century. Eventually, it was consecrated by the Pope and the Emperor only in 1275. And of course, it has gone through a lot of renovation over the several centuries. But one of the most important part of the trivia in this is that it was supposed to have the two towers. And as you could see, that this is one of the tower with the belfry, and the other tower actually was never completely finished. Now, of course, you could see some construction going on there, and it is, of course, not to finish the remaining part from several centuries ago. This is just some renovation which is happening. And I will see if I can take you through the inside of the cathedral. Of course, I will stay silent as the norms are in the cathedral, so we will just kind of maybe quickly see it, and later on while we are chatting up, I can tell you more about the different parts of the cathedral. This, of course, is a very, very impressive entrance with fantastic architectures and the carvings and the statues that you have. Let's quickly go inside the cathedral and we will talk about the details of the cathedral later. Okay, so as we are stepping out and going to the center of the city, I'll tell you a few very nice things about this cathedral, besides the fact that it's obviously beautiful. Just remember this tower, and I'll tell you a bit more about this. Now, there is one very, very interesting tradition that you actually have in this cathedral, which is between the 10 p.m. in the night and I think up to 2 or 3 p.m. Or a.m. in the morning. There's actually a night watchman who goes up the tower and calls out every hour during the night. In the olden times, of course, it was meant to be the night watchman who is watching the citizens of the city, but the city of Luzon actually decided that they will continue the tradition, and they are still maintaining that 600-year-old tradition here. Now, since we're talking about a bit of a history, and we are going to the center of the town, Luzon name actually comes from Lusana. It is it was one of the Roman military settlement with that name, and the history of this city you could actually trace back to, I think, at least 1500 to 2000 years ago. Now, as you could see, I have played a smart trick, and I'm walking down because this actually is a hilly city, and I wanted to start from the lake, but then I realized if I have to keep on walking all the way up, I'll be like sweating and panting. So it probably is better that I start from the topmost part of the city, which is this cathedral, and then go down. And now I'm going to go to this central square, uh, which incidentally I'll kind of tell you a bit more about this. It was actually first established, the square, something in 1500s. It was at the cross section of the two trading routes, yeah, and it's called the Place de la Paul, which actually means in French it was a swarm, because we have kind of literally come down one hill, and during that time it was actually a swampy land on the side of the hill, and that's where they started. And there are a lot of interesting things around it, which is what you're seeing right in front is the town hall, yeah. But more importantly, there's one very nice fountain here that you see, and the beauty of this fountain, this is that the statue that you see, let me see if I can zoom in for you. This statue is actually called the Allegory of Justice. You would see that the eyes are closed, and then it actually has a sword and a balance. Yeah. And incidentally, these small pieces of the sword and the balance, obviously, initially this was actually built on a tree trunk. And then, of course, later on in the 1978, I think you actually had this nice thing renovated, etc. These small statues and the balance that you have, they actually have been stolen so many times that now they have actually even put this with a chip inside. So if anyone steals it, they know where exactly is this. So of course, if you are kind of too fascinated by antique collection, this probably is not the place where you should actually start your antique collection. They can actually track you down. And at the bottom of the statue is there are three small statues, which basically is the statue of an emperor. You can see two on this side and the one on the other side. The statue of an emperor, of the pope, and a magistrate, which basically means that all of them are actually subservient to the law. Yeah? So it's an allegory of justice, or the subservient to the justice. And this piece at the back is actually you probably can guess it. I mean, you have the Omega written there. So it actually is a very, very interesting piece of cloth. And every hour during the daytime, there are actually a lot of figures that come out of that, the doors that you have. And there are a lot of these figures, and with the music, and then with the voice of one very, very famous artist, that it recollects actually the story. And the story is actually about how Lausanne came out from the domination of the Burmese, and then the joy of celebration when it came out of the domination of the Burmese Empire. Now, I am actually going inside the town hall. We'll probably not get a chance to go inside, but I'll take you through one of the section of it. And what you see is these pedestrian walkways. Incidentally, there are two rivers. One of the river is called Louvre, another is called the Flon. So those two rivers actually flow under this entire town. Yeah. was actually the map of the Old Town, and the streets that we are walking on under this are actually two rivers, Lu and the Flon, that they are floating around. And going further down, you would probably come across a very busy square, and of course, being the COVID time, people probably are not managing the social distancing so well, but definitely the restaurants are following all the rules and regulations. Otherwise, this probably would have been a very, very, very busy square with all the the chairs next to each other. You could see that while people are kind of enjoying maybe the last few weeks of the summers, tables are still kept a couple of meters apart from each other. Yeah, and now I'm kind of probably already 100 meters down the cathedral, or the top of the city that I had started from. And while I'm walking to the next place, let me tell you a few more things about the city. And the next place, which of course is extremely important for the rest of Switzerland, and it is also tied to the concept of what we discussed just now from that statue, which is the Allegory of Justice. Yeah. So we are heading towards the Swiss Federal Court. It's a fantastic place overlooking the Lake Geneva. It's almost like a terrace. You could literally see a good part of the Lake Geneva, and I'll tell you more about it as we get closer to it. But in the meanwhile, I asked you a trivia that Lausanne is the fourth largest city in Switzerland. Which are the first three? And perhaps one or two are easy to guess. I think the two famous cities in Switzerland are obviously Zurich and Geneva. But besides that, it's Basel, one of the cities that we had covered earlier. It's also actually a very big city. And so the first three cities, or the three biggest cities, are Zurich, Basel, Geneva, and then Lausanne. Yeah. So it's a bit of a walk until we get to the Swiss Federal Court, and I have to obviously let this bus go away, and before I can cross the street, I'm just wondering if there's any pedestrian crossing here, so then I might as well use that. Oh yes, so this is a pedestrian crossing, and while we are waiting to cross this, hopefully sometime soon, we are kind of standing right in front of a metro station. And metro, there's one very nice interesting trivia around metro also. Incidentally, first of all, Lausanne is the only city in Switzerland which has a metro system. The rest everything is trams or these buses that you see. And it is the smallest metro system in the whole world. I think it goes for it covers only maybe 5 to 6 kilometers. Obviously, the cities in Switzerland are not so big, and hence you would really not have a need for the metro. And I'm sure there are some strong reasons why the metros are built. And if I were to take a guess, I would actually think that this probably, I mean, of course, there are a lot of mountains and hills in Switzerland, but in most of the mountains, usually you will kind of go up in a cable car. This probably is one of the most hilly city that we have in Switzerland. So, as you could see, we have again kind of come down and we are going up again. So the reason why this city has a metro is that it actually covers the multiple levels and it goes from one level to another, which is very difficult to do through maybe the trams. See, if you look this side, you will see that you already are again climbing up, and it's almost like another level that we are going through. So if you know that, I mean, as far as I know, it is the smallest metro system in the whole world. If there's any other metro system which is smaller than this, then please let us know, of course, and I'll also try to do my own research. And while we were talking about it, we are already in front of the Swiss Federal Court building, and in fact I remember the first time I had come here was probably in 2008, and I discovered this place very incidentally. And you would see, hopefully, let me see if I could get to a bit of a shade, and I can show you the markings. Those markings are actually the coat of arms of different canton. And let me see if I can zoom in for you, and if you are able to see some of these nice French villages. Of course, very difficult to visualize it, and hopefully as I'm talking through it, you would be able to maybe soak in and appreciate some of it. And this Lake Geneva is also an international border between Switzerland and France. So half of the Lake Geneva is in Switzerland and the rest of it is in France. And on the other side is the French mountains and the wonderful, beautiful French villages. If you kind of really go maybe around 50 kilometers out, the very famous mountain called Mont Blanc is actually just around 50 kilometers from here. You could drive down there in less than 1 hour. Yeah, and there are a lot of history associated with that also. So as now we are walking down, it's a bit of a long walk, yeah, to go to or get closer to the Lake Geneva. Yeah, and I will use the time to tell you some interesting trivia, have a bit of a chat through the comments, and now just to remind you, this is the Swiss Federal Court and the statue in front of it is of the William Tell. Okay, now let's keep going. Now, the William Tell and the story. If you have heard of a story that one of the archer actually placed an apple on top of his, on the head of his son and shot it with his eyes covered with a basically he was blindsided with a cloth. Then that is the story of William Tell. Now I'm obviously again going down the hill. So now you could see that obviously that was a smart trick I played on you guys. Instead of starting from the close to the lake, which of course is very beautiful, I started from the topmost point so that it's a bit easy on me. Yeah. So talking about William Tell, yeah, the reason why he is considered to be the Swiss hero and the folklore associated with that really is about that during the early days of the Swiss Federation coming together with many of his initial cantons, it was under the Habsburg Empire, which was basically managed by the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Right? And as a part of the one of the bet that they had, William Tell was asked that if he is able to shoot the apple blindsided, and the apple was kept on the head of his son, they thought that he will never take this chance, and that was he actually did it, and that was the movement of the Swiss independence, at least for the cantons which initially came together. Yeah, and so yeah, he is a very, very legendary figure when we talk about the Swiss history. And while many of us have probably heard this folklore of an archer shooting the apple blindsided, it actually is a Swiss folklore. And now I am getting closer to one of the art districts of Luzon. And incidentally, when we talk about the art and culture, this is not something which is new to Lausanne. Even in the olden times, it actually was, for whatever reason, a great refugee center for a lot of artists, as well as a great destination for many artists and the poets who used to take holidays here. And many of us would have heard of T.S. Eliot, obviously very famous poet. He wrote his famous poem The Waste Land when he was in Lausanne. Even E. Hemingway used to come here in the 1920s. So a lot of very interesting trivia, and you could literally see that now we are almost getting the flavor. Even when you're looking at the maybe the buildings, it's almost like you are getting a taste of the French Riviera, of course around the Nice and Cannes. Now you may be thinking that why I am taking you to a very modern concrete kind of an architecture. Yeah, and it's called Platform 10. Let's see why it is called Platform 10. Now, this incidentally is still under construction, first of all. Yeah, and it is bringing together the three different streams of art, which is design, fine art, and a museum which is dedicated only to photography. Yeah, and once it is kind of constructed, it will hopefully look like this. It is already functional with the Museum of the Fine Art, and obviously it's a huge place. Already you could see some art cafes here, people sitting around. It's still under construction, but this one, I spoke about Platform 10, and why Platform 10? This probably is again is a giveaway that the building that you see on the far end is actually Lausanne station, and this was the platform 10, was almost like an extension. So this land was actually donated by the railway station, and hence it was almost like an extension of the train station. That's the reason why it's called the platform 10. This is the Museum of the Fine Arts, which is already functional. Yeah. And these are the nice art cafes that you could see. This is probably one for the kids. Yeah. And now we are walking towards the Lausanne train station. And while we are walking towards it, let me tell you that this is also one of the very old train station, originally constructed in 1856. Yeah. And I will tell you, or I'll show you something very nice, and that will hopefully help you to understand why this was probably the far end of the platform in the olden days. And of course it was probably not being used, and hence they decided to use it for a better purpose. You could see these train tracks, yeah, many of this, and they are leading to a very, very interesting piece of I wouldn't call it an architecture, it's a functional piece, and the people who are associated with maybe the trains or the railways, or who have very keen interest in it, they will understand what this was used for. So all the train tracks are actually leading to this place, yeah, and this is the end terminus with kind of almost a circular structure around it. Any guesses what it was actually used for? And maybe it will become much clearer if you see it on the other side. And until then, I will maybe let you make a guess. Yeah? Now, as you could see, if this is the end point, the engines can come, and if they want to be put, or if they had to be put on a different track, they literally can rotate this entire piece, and you see at least maybe 5 or 6 train lines. So this entire piece, you just kind of rotate to the next one, and the engine goes on to the next track. This is actually fairly common in Switzerland, because obviously you do not really have so much of space to create the changeover lines. So this actually becomes a very, very important way of using the space very wisely. And of course now we are in front of the main train station, which is obviously quite functional, and in fact it has the train lines going all the way to the one of the third largest city that is seen right in front, Geneva. Yeah, and if you read about one of the other places written at the top, it's called Auchi. I hope I am pronouncing it properly. Definitely not properly as compared to the French accent. Yeah. So we are going under the train station and crossing over. Auchi is actually the name of a port. Yeah, the port at the Lake Geneva. And while we are going to that, it's a bit of a long walk, I will see if I can pace up myself, and then in the meanwhile we will again use the time to talk more about Lausanne and Lake Geneva region, and when we were in front of the Swiss Federal District or the Swiss Federal Court, we spoke about two things. One was the French villages on the other side of Lake Geneva, and we spoke about the Mont Blanc, which is the topmost peak. Now, each of these places actually have significant history and of course the charm associated with it. Let's start with the French villages. I'll just use the time to cross the pedestrian crossing. It was a green light. Okay, so on the other side of Lake Geneva is, while there are a lot of very nice, beautiful villages, the two villages that really stand out is a village called Evian. It's a short term for a village called Evian-les-Bains. Evian, it is spelled as Evian. Does it ring a bell? If not, then let me tell you, you would have probably heard about the mineral water with the same name, Evian. And of course, it probably is one of the most famous brand when it comes to mineral water. In reality, there is a spring which is the source of the Evian mineral water. Okay, and it is in that village. So Evian is just across the Lake Geneva. One can take a boat, which takes maybe around just 30 minutes, and you could get onto Evian. I will take you to the port, which from where the boat actually leaves, almost like every hour or every 2 hours. And the other one is, that's a very tricky one for me to pronounce. It's called Yverdon. And if any of you got the French accent right, then you can perhaps maybe put it in the comment. Mine is certainly not correct. I will spell it out for you. It is Yverdon or ON, Yverdon. Yeah. And that actually is a very, very famous for the perfumes and the fragrances, and there are a lot of beauty products, and if I'm not mistaken, then there is a very, very famous brand with that name. So again, Yverdon is also one of those villages that you can literally just take a boat and get to the other side. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I always suggest people to do. First of all, unfortunately, a lot of people who are coming to Switzerland from outside of Switzerland do not really get a chance or time, or do not perhaps have the knowledge that the French side of Switzerland is extremely beautiful, and which is something from Caterpillar we always like to suggest, that also explore the places that may not be that obvious. Well, of course, Lausanne, as I said, is the fourth largest city, so it's obviously not a small place. It's just that people coming from outside of Switzerland perhaps spend more time in the central Switzerland only. And when people come to Lausanne, and we obviously guide them to explore these parts, we always ask them to visit these French villages on the other side, and trust me, every single time people have said that this perhaps is one of the most beautiful parts of Switzerland. Now, as I was saying, that if you look at the buildings, right, you almost start getting a flavor of the French Riviera, right? And French Riviera, of course, is next to the sea, and Switzerland is a landlocked country. But this probably is the longest shoreline that we have in Switzerland. As I said, the Lake Geneva can basically it extends at least from one side to another for 100 kilometers, and if you kind of do a trip around Lake Geneva, then you're talking about maybe around 200 kilometers of shoreline, yeah. And on the other side are obviously these lakes, and if you go further out, then we reach Mont Blanc, yeah. And talking about Mont Blanc, of course, it's a topmost peak in the European Alps. Sorry to disappoint you guys or anyone who thinks Jungfrau in Switzerland is a topmost peak. It's not. Mont Blanc is the topmost peak. So, and it's just kind of maybe 50 kilometers from here. And for the people who do not know, especially the folks who are joining in from India, Air India, the main airline of India, has the unfortunate distinction of crashing over twice in Mont Blanc. And of course, I mean, it was very unfortunate, and in fact, a lot of movies have been made on this topic. Yeah. But India actually lost one of its very, very prominent scientists, Homi Jahangir Baba. And he was the one who started the nuclear program for India. And even now, there are a lot of mountaineers who actually discover the... incidentally, the plane was never found. Yeah, and but now with obviously the global warming and the glaciers melting, some of these parts have become accessible. So the plane wrecks people have started finding, as well as since these were Indian planes, there were a lot of Indian passengers. People actually have been hunting for a lot of Indian gold jewelry, and they actually have been finding it as recent as maybe 4 to 5 years ago. So that's one very, very interesting part, and I think I'm very, very close to Auchi now. You could probably see some of the nice, beautiful houses on the back side, and let me just quickly take a turn and get to Auchi. Okay, so here we are. Just around the corner we have Auchi, which is the port that I was talking about, and now you could see the beautiful Lake Geneva shoreline, and even a lot of beautiful boats and the yachts which are parked here. Now that probably is the reason why I was saying that this is like gives you a flavor of the French Riviera. I'm waiting for the red light to turn green before I can cross over and can show you from maybe up and close. And in the meanwhile, of course, so this is not called the French Riviera, but we actually call it Swiss Riviera, given that obviously it's part of Switzerland. And we now getting much closer to the lake. You now probably can see how beautiful the view is. Yeah. We are a bit more closer to the French villages on the other side now, but still a long way to go. Fairly warm day. It's a nice promenade, fountains, and you could see the kids playing around in the fountain and enjoying the last few weeks of the summer before the autumn sets in, and then of course winters. This is also called the place of navigation, of course, because from here the famous boat and the ships go to the other side of France. Now, Lake Geneva is actually called Lac Léman, pronounced as LAC, for Lac is lake, Léman is pronounced as LEMAN. It's called Lac Léman. And the important part is that, as I said, this is international border. So if you talk to anyone from France, he will not understand that why we are talking about what is Lake Geneva. For them, it's not Lake Geneva; it's Lake Lac Léman. And around this port is also a very, very beautiful castle, which was originally built as a tower that you see. Yeah. It's called Chateau d'Auchy, and now it's a beautiful 4-star hotel. And right now we are in front of a monument which is for the Tokyo 2020, and it says 313 days left, 19 hours, 12 minutes, 57, 56, 55 seconds to the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. Now, of course, all of us know, because of the pandemic, the Olympic Games have been postponed. Now, question, why we are talking about Olympic and why this monument is here? Any guesses? And I will take you to the next stop, which will hopefully give you the answer to that. In the meanwhile, as I said, this is a nice 4-star hotel, Hotel Chateau d'Auchy. Yeah, it's part of small luxury hotels of the world. Now, for the people who do not know, Lausanne is also called the Olympic capital. This title was conferred on Lausanne in 1994. Yeah, and while I'm taking you to the last stop for today, which will explain the association between Lausanne and Olympic, you could in the meanwhile enjoy the views of the Lake Geneva and the French Alps on the other side. Lausanne is called the Olympic capital because it actually houses International Olympic Committee. Yeah, and International Olympic Committee also actually has a very nice museum in Lausanne. So this is obviously the headquarters, as well as where we'll get to the museum. In the meanwhile, see the views. And it is very, very incidental that it's exactly 100 years ago, in 1920. Yeah. The Olympics, so of course this year the Olympics have been postponed because of COVID and Corona pandemic. in 1920 it restarted because in 1916, because of the World War, it could not happen. So the World War, and then in the 1918 was the Spanish flu. So we are interestingly very, very incidental. And what you see on the other side is actually a very, very famous luxury 5-star hotel called View Rivers. It was originally constructed in 1862, I think. Yeah. Obviously facing the lakeside, so location can't get better than this. And as you could see, we are just 200 meters from the Musée Olympique. Now, yeah, so it is very incidental that 100 years ago, the Olympics could not happen because of the Spanish flu and the World War. And that time, we are interestingly living in a very, very similar times. And when we talk about that, there is the theme of the exhibitions in here right now is that when the past meets the present. And I found it to be very, very, very strong, coincidental, and a food for thought also for each one of us. Right? Now, World War I and Spanish flu. The entire world was in huge shock and living through very, very tough times like what we have right now. Yeah. And that was the time when, to give a message of hope and peace, the 5 rings, which then became the symbol of Olympic Games, were designed. Anyone who would like to put in the comments why 5 rings? And then there was another symbol which is used, which is the doves. Yeah. So all these traditions with the doves, so they're allowed to fly again. This is a symbol of peace and hope. And the 5 rings. These traditions actually started, and incidentally, Japan participated in the game of 1920, I think after some time, and got its first gold medal, if I'm not mistaken. And incidentally, in 2020, the Olympic Games were supposed to happen in Tokyo. So that's another strong coincidence. And now we are almost in front of the Olympic Museum, and let me show you. It's a fantastic piece of architecture, and while we are crossing the road, you could see those 5 rings. And if you have not been able to guess so far, those 5 rings obviously represent the 5 continents. And I'm very, very low. Then this basically represents where the Olympic Games were held in different years. 56, Melbourne, 1960, Rome. And while I am running extremely low on my battery, please mistake if I get disconnected, just assume it's a mistake, and we'll have to unfortunately end the tour there. But I certainly hope that the battery lasts until I reach the top. Trying to walk faster. I couldn't pull a very fast one. Ultimately, I do have to do this climb, and we are almost there. A very nice sculptors of the bicyclist, and the last few 2012 London, 2014 Sochi, 16 Rio, yeah, and here we are, which is the front of the Olympic Museum, and this is where we'll end the tour. So I really hope that you enjoyed this tour, and if you really liked it, please drop in a comment, like our Facebook channel, as well as share it with others so that they also get a taste of different parts of the world while still under lockdown. And we'll keep bringing this on to you. And next comes in these series of live tours is perhaps one from Zurich. And before I disconnect, let me give you a last glimpse of the Lake Geneva and the France. Okay guys, see you then. Have fun.